Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if best Jeanist found Deku first. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The water in the koi pond was murky, stagnated by algae and the apathy of a school maintenance crew that had long since given up. Floating on the surface, bobbing gently against the concrete lip, was a notebook. Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13. It looked pathetic. The pages were soaking up the dirty water, the ink likely bleeding into indecipherable Rorschach tests of black and blue. It looked like trash. Izuku Midoriya stared at it. He felt a strange kinship with the object. Burnt, discarded, and drowning. Stupid, he whispered, his voice cracking. He fished the notebook out, his fingers trembling as they brushed the slimy surface. Stupid. He wasn't sure if he was talking to the notebook, or to Kaken for throwing it there, or to himself for fishing it out. The walk home was a blur of heat and humiliation. The Japanese summer was oppressive, the air thick enough to chew, smelling of asphalt and ozone. Izuku walked with his head down, his shoulders hunched so high they almost touched his ears. It was a defensive posture, a habit honed over a decade of being the nail that stuck out, the pebble in the shoe of Aldera Junior High. If you want to be a hero that badly, there's a quick way to do it. Take a swan dive off the roof and pray for a quirk in your next life. The words echoed in his skull, bouncing around with the force of an explosion. Katsuki Bakugo's voice was always loud, but today it had been deafening. Izuku clutched the straps of his yellow backpack. Don't think about it. Just go home. Write in the notebook. Dry it out with a hairdryer. Pretend it didn't happen. But the universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. The villain attack under the Tatooine Station underpass happened so fast Izuku didn't even have time to scream. One moment he was walking into the shadow of the bridge, muttering about Mount Lady's debut. The next, he was suffocating. Sludge. It tasted like sewage and oil. It forced its way down his throat, filling his nose, burning his eyes. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. A wet, gurgling voice whispered against his ear. Don't struggle, kid. It'll only hurt for a minute. Izuku clawed at the fluid. His fingers passed through the green muck, finding no purchase. Panic, white-hot and primal, seized his chest. I'm dying. I'm actually dying. No. I haven't done anything yet. I haven't become a hero. His vision began to spot with black. The world was fading. The pain in his lungs was a screaming fire, and then the pressure vanished. Texas. Smash! The wind pressure alone nearly took Izuku's head off. The sludge exploded outward, splattering against the concrete walls of the tunnel. Izuku hit the ground, gasping, coughing up bile and green fluid, his eyes streaming tears. He looked up, vision blurry, to see a towering silhouette backlit by the afternoon sun. I am here, All Might. The rest of the encounter was a fever dream. The autograph. The sheer, overwhelming presence of the symbol of peace. Izuku had clung to the man's leg, literally, desperate for an answer to the question that had been eating a hole in his soul since he was 4 years old. They landed on a rooftop. The steam rose from All Might's body. The truth came out. The deflating. The skeleton man. The injury that looked like a spiderweb of agony etched into the world's strongest torso. And then the words. Pros are constantly risking their lives, All Might said, his voice no longer booming, but tired. Heavy with the weight of reality. I cannot simply say, you can become a hero even without power. The silence that followed was louder than any explosion Bakugo could produce. If you want to help others, there's always the police force. They get a lot of flack because the heroes capture the villains, but it's a fine profession. Izuku stood frozen. The wind whipped his hair, drying the tears on his cheeks into tight, itchy tracks. It's not bad to dream, All Might said, turning toward the door to the stairwell. But you also have to consider the reality, young man. The door clicked shut. Izuku was alone on the roof. He didn't know how long he stood there. 10 minutes? An hour? The sun began to dip lower, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. Consider the reality. Izuku walked down the stairs like a ghost. He stepped out onto the street, his feet dragging. The notebook was in his hand again. He looked at All Might's signature, sprawling across 2 pages. He should be happy. He possessed a treasure that would sell for thousands online. He had met God, and God had told him to give up. He's right, Izuku muttered. The words tasted like ash. Don't cry. You knew it. You always knew it. You just wanted someone to tell you otherwise. He turned a corner aimless. He wasn't heading home. He couldn't face his mother yet. She would look at him with those big, tearful eyes and apologize for birthing him wrong. I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm sorry. He hated that apology. He didn't want pity. He wanted a chance. Boom! A sound in the distance. The ground rumbled slightly beneath his red sneakers. Izuku flinched. Another villain attack? His feet turned automatically toward the sound. It was instinct. A Pavlovian response honed by years of fanboying. Check the scene. Analyze the quirks. Take notes. He stopped himself. Why bother? He whispered. It's not for me. I'm a civilian. I should go home. But the smoke was rising, a dark pillar against the twilight. Screams drifted on the wind. Izuku bit his lips so hard it bled. He walked toward the smoke. Not because he wanted to, but because he didn't know what else to do with himself. He was a moth, and the danger was the only light he understood. The scene was chaos. Fire danced in the alleyway, licking up the sides of the buildings. The heat was intense, pushing the crowd of onlookers back against the police tape. Izuku squeezed through a gap between 2 businessmen, his eyes wide. It was the sludge villain. But All Might caught him, Izuku thought, his stomach dropping. He put him in a bottle. Did he drop it? When I grabbed his leg, guilt, cold and heavy, settled in his gut. This was his fault. If he hadn't clung to All Might, if he hadn't wasted the hero's time. Why aren't the heroes doing anything? A bystander shouted. Izuku looked at the line of pros. Death Arms was there, lifting a slab of concrete, but he wouldn't go near the fire. I can't get close. My punches won't do anything against that fluid. Kamui Woods was perched on a lamppost, looking frantic. I need water. If I go in there, I'll be kindling in seconds. Empty Lady was stuck outside the alley, her gigantic form blocking the entrance but unable to squeeze through the narrow buildings. I can't fit. I'll crush the civilians if I try. They were waiting. Waiting for someone with the right quirk. Waiting for the perfect match. That's how the industry works, Izuku analyzed, the thoughts coming unbidden. Type matchups. Quirk compatibility. If you don't fit the mold, you stand back. Where is All Might? Someone screamed. He was chasing this guy earlier. Izuku clutched his chest. He can't. He's out of time. He's reached his limit. The villain roared, a wet, gurgling sound that sent shivers through the crowd. I hit the jackpot. This kid's quirk is explosive. With this power in my body, I can take All Might. This kid? Izuku squinted through the smoke and the shimmering heat haze. The slime was thrashing, and in the center of the dark green fluid, a face was visible. Just a mouth and eyes, gasping for air, ash-blonde hair. Red eyes wide with a terror Izuku had never seen before. Kaken. The world stopped. The noise of the crowd faded into a dull roar, like being underwater. The heat vanished. All Izuku could see were those eyes. Katsuki Bakugo, the boy who was strong, the boy who was perfect, the boy who was going to be the best. He was drowning. He was dying, and the heroes were watching. Izuku's legs moved. There was no thought process. There was no strategy. There was no consider the reality. He ducked under the police tape. Hey! Kid! Get back here! Death Arms shouted. Izuku didn't hear him. He was sprinting. His sneakers slapped against the pavement, the sound echoing in his ears. The heat hit him like a physical wall, singing his eyebrows, drying his throat instantly. What do I do? What do I do? He had no weapon. He had no plan. He had no power. He looked at the villain. The eyes. The fluid body. Flashback. Page 25. Kamui Woods vs. The Swamp Gang. Weakness. Solid objects can hurt them, but you can disrupt their vision. Izuku swung his backpack off his shoulder. With a roar that tore at his throat, he hurled it. The yellow bag flew through the air, the strap catching the air. It slammed into the sludge villain's left eye. Gah! The villain recoiled, the fluid rippling. For a split second, the grip loosened. Bakugo gasped, sucking in a lungful of smoky air. Deku? Bakugo choked out. Izuku didn't stop. He slammed into the slime, his hands digging into the muck. It burned. It felt like acid. He clawed at the sludge covering Bakugo's mouth. Kaken! Izuku screamed. I couldn't just stand there and watch you die. Get off me! Bakugo yelled, though there was no heat in it, only panic. The villain recovered. The eye regenerated, focusing on Izuku with pure malice. You again? The villain hissed. You little pest! A tendril of slime, thick as a tree trunk and hard as concrete, reared back. It cast a shadow over Izuku and Bakugo. Izuku froze. He realized, with crystal clarity, that he was going to die. He had bought maybe 3 seconds of time. He hadn't saved anyone. He had just added another body count to the tragedy. The tendril swung down. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut. I'm sorry, Mom. Whoosh. There was no impact. Instead, there was a sound like a whip cracking, sharp, precise, and incredibly loud. Fiber Master, denim bind. The air pressure shifted. Izuku opened his eyes. The slime tendril had stopped inches from his face. But it wasn't just stopped, it was caught. A net of thick, blue cables had materialized out of nowhere, wrapping around the villain's sludge appendage and pulling it taut. The cables were vibrating with tension, humming like guitar strings. Izuku looked back. Standing at the entrance of the alley, calmly stepping past the stunned Death Arms, was a man who looked like he had walked off a runway rather than into a disaster zone. He wore a high-collared denim suit that covered his face up to his nose. His blonde hair was combed to an impossible perfection, sweeping to the side in a wave that defied the humidity. His green eyes were sharp, analytical, and utterly calm. The number 4 hero. Best Jeanist. Such uncouth behavior, Jeanist said, his voice muffled slightly by his collar but projecting clearly. Making a mess in the streets. Wearing someone else's body like a cheap suit. It is unfashionable. The villain roared and tried to retract his arm, but the cables held fast. Who the hell are you? A tailor of justice, Jeanist replied. He raised his hand. From the sleeves of his suit, carbon fiber threads shot out, invisible to the naked eye until they caught the light of the fire. Wait! Izuku shouted, his voice hoarse. You can't grab him. He's fluid. He'll slip through. Jeanist's eyes flicked to Izuku for a fraction of a second. Observation is key, boy. But you assume I am merely grabbing him. Jeanist clenched his fist. Titan. Suddenly, the clothes of every bystander in the front row, the businessmen, the students, even the other heroes, stiffened. But more importantly, the school uniform Bakugo was wearing, and the tattered uniform Izuku was wearing, suddenly went rigid. Whoa! Bakugo grunted as his collar became as hard as steel. With a flick of his wrist, Jeanist manipulated the fibers of the boys' clothes. He didn't pull the boys, he commanded their outfits to evacuate. Izuku felt his uniform yank him backward with incredible force. It was like being grabbed by a giant, invisible hand. He and Bakugo were launched out of the sludge, flying through the air and landing roughly on the pavement behind the police line. No! The villain shrieked, now holding nothing but empty air. Now, Jeanist said, adjusting his cuff. For the finishing stitch. The cables wrapped around the villain tightened. But Jeanist wasn't done. He gestured to the surrounding environment, the laundry hanging on a balcony above the alley, the canvas awnings of the shops. Fiber Master, grosso knot. The fabrics tore themselves free from the environment, swarming the villain like a flock of birds. They wrapped around him, layer after layer, cotton, polyester, canvas. They absorbed the fluid, mixing with it, and then Jeanist tightened the fibers of the trap itself. The sludge was compressed. The liquid was forced into the weave of the fabric, trapped in a prison of 1,000 threads. Within 10 seconds, the sludge villain was nothing more than a lumpy, immobile ball of mixed textiles, suspended in the air by denim cables. Silence descended on the alley. The fire still crackled, but the danger was gone. It hadn't been a brawl. It hadn't been a smash. It had been a surgery. Izuku lay on the ground, gasping for air, staring at the man in the denim suit. Best Jeanist didn't pose. He didn't laugh. He simply walked over to the police officers, lowered the captured villain gently to the ground, and began giving instructions on containment. Ensure he is kept in a dehydrated container, Jeanist said. The fibers will hold for now, but he is a persistent stain. The aftermath was a blur of flashing lights and microphones. Izuku sat on the back of an ambulance, a shock blanket draped over his shoulders. He was shaking. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving him cold and nauseous. To his right, Bakugo was being praised. That quirk is amazing. A reporter gushed. You held out for so long. You're a natural-born hero, kid. Death Arms said, slapping Bakugo on the back. Sidekick for me when you graduate, eh? Bakugo wasn't shouting. He was sitting quietly, his eyes narrowed, looking at the ground. He looked shaken. To his left, Izuku was being scolded. Are you insane? Kamui Woods demanded, his wooden fingers poking Izuku's chest. You have no quirk. You could have gotten yourself killed. You could have gotten him killed by distracting us. Absolute recklessness, Death Arms agreed, turning from Bakugo to glare at Izuku. Don't interfere with pro work. You're just a civilian. Know your place. Izuku nodded, shrinking into the blanket. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know, he thought. I know I'm useless. I know I was in the way. He looked down at his hands. They were scraped and bloody. I just moved. The crowd began to disperse. The heroes packed up. Izuku stood up, folding the blanket neatly. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to go home and sleep for a week. He began to walk away, slipping into the shadows of the side streets to avoid the remaining reporters. He didn't notice the tall, slender figure leaning against a brick wall, watching him. Izuku turned into the narrow alleyway that served as a shortcut to his apartment complex. It was quiet here, away from the sirens. Deku. Izuku froze. He turned slowly. Bakugo stood at the entrance of the alley. He was panting slightly, as if he had run to catch up. His uniform was rumpled, his expression a mixture of rage and confusion. Kaken, Izuku whispered. Bakugo grit his teeth. I didn't ask for your help. I didn't need you. I was fine. Izuku flinched. I know, don't look down on me. Bakugo roared, his voice cracking. You're a quirkless pebble. You're nothing. Don't think you saved me. You didn't do anything. I owe you nothing. He spun around and stomped away, his shoulders vibrating with suppressed emotion. Izuku watched him go. He understood. Kaken's pride was his armor, and today it had been dented. He is loud, a calm voice said. And his posture is terrible. All that hunching, it restricts the airflow. Izuku jumped, spinning around. Best Jeanist stepped out of the shadows. Up close, the hero was intimidatingly tall. His presence was different from All Might's. All Might felt like the sun, warm, blinding, massive. Best Jeanist felt like a steel wire, cool, thin, and unbreakable. Be Best Jeanist. Izuku stammered. He bowed frantically. Thank you for saving us. I'm sorry I got in the way. I won't do it again. Jeanist didn't respond immediately. He walked closer, his boots clicking softly on the pavement. He circled Izuku, his eyes scanning the boy from head to toe. Stop bowing, Jeanist commanded. It wrinkles the shirt. Izuku snapped upright, trembling. You are the boy who ran in, Jeanist said. It wasn't a question. The quirkless one. Why yes, sir. Izuku looked at his feet. The other heroes, they told me. I was reckless. I made things worse. You were reckless, Jeanist agreed. You have no training. You have no equipment. You have no power. You charged into a situation where pro-heroes were stalled, wielding nothing but a backpack and hysteria. Izuku felt the tears pricking his eyes again. Here it comes. The lecture. The confirmation. However, Jeanist continued, his voice shifting in tone. The other heroes stood and watched. They were paralyzed by the mismatch of their quirks. They were worried about property damage, or liability, or the bad fit of the situation. Jeanist stopped in front of Izuku. He reached out with a gloved hand and adjusted Izuku's collar, straightening it with a precise tug. A hero's job is to weave order out of chaos, Jeanist said softly. While they were debating the pattern, you grabbed the needle. Izuku looked up, his eyes wide. Huh, you moved, Jeanist said. Why, Izuku swallowed. My legs, they just moved on their own. He looked like he was asking for help. I couldn't think. I couldn't let him die. Jeanist stared at him. The silence stretched for a long moment. The industry today, Jeanist began, turning to look at the moon rising above the buildings, is obsessed with flashy prints. Big explosions. Giant size. Super strength. Everyone wants to be the centerpiece of the outfit. They rely on their raw material, their quirks, to do the work for them. He looked back at Izuku. That boy, the explosive one. He has excellent raw material. A strong fabric. But he is frayed. He lacks discipline. He lacks style. He screams to cover up his fear. Jeanist pointed a finger at Izuku's chest. You are a mess. Your hair is a disaster. Your tie is tied wrong. You stutter. You cry too much. And you are quirkless. You are, by all accounts, a loose thread. Izuku flinched, but Jeanist said, leaning down so they were eye to eye. You have tensile strength. I saw you clawing at that slime. You didn't hesitate. You didn't wait for permission. That spirit? That is something that cannot be manufactured. It must be natural. Jeanist straightened up. Tell me, boy. What is your name? Midoriya, Izuku squeaked. Izuku Midoriya. Do you want to be a hero? The question hung in the air. Can I? Izuku thought. Can I really? After All Might said no? After everyone said no? Izuku clenched his fists. I don't have a quirk. All Might told me. He told me to be realistic. He said I can't be a hero without power. Jeanist's eyes narrowed slightly behind his collar. All Might is a man of great power. He is a sledgehammer. To a sledgehammer, every problem looks like a nail. He solves problems with force. Jeanist raised a hand. A single thread of denim unspooled from his sleeve, dancing in the air like a snake. I am not a sledgehammer, Midoriya. I am a fiber master. I understand that strength comes in many forms. A single thread is weak. It can be snapped by a child. But weave a million threads together, bind them with discipline and technique, and you can stop a train. You can bind a villain. You can hold the world together. The thread wrapped around Izuku's wrist, gentle but firm. Being quirkless is a severe disadvantage, Jeanist said bluntly. I will not lie to you. It is a handicap. You will have to work 10 times harder than anyone else. You will have to be smarter, faster, and more prepared. You cannot rely on a lucky punch. You must rely on preparation. On tools. On style. Jeanist looked Izuku dead in the eye. I do not accept interns usually. I find students to be unrefined. Messy. But I see potential in your weave. I see a boy who ran when others stood still. Jeanist extended a hand. If you wish to remain a loose thread, destined to be discarded, then go home. Listen to All Might. Be a policeman. It is a safe life. Izuku's breath hitched. But Jeanist said, if you wish to be tailored, if you wish to let me iron out your creases, stitch up your weaknesses, and fashion you into something durable, then come to my agency on Saturday morning, 6 a.m. sharp. Do not be late. And for heaven's sake, comb your hair. Izuku stared at the hand. It wasn't the hand of a god like All Might. It was a human hand. Gloved, elegant, and demanding. He didn't offer a dream. He didn't say you can be the greatest. He offered work. He offered pain. He offered a chance. Izuku thought of the notebook drowning in the pond. He thought of the fire. He thought of the feeling of his fingernails digging into the sludge. He didn't want to be safe. He wanted to save people. Izuku reached out. His hand was shaking, covered in dried muck and small cuts. He grasped Best Jeanist's hand. I'll be there, Izuku said. He tried to sound confident, but his voice wobbled. I'll be there. Jeanist gripped his hand firmly. Good. We have much work to do. Your posture is atrocious. Jeanist turned and walked away, his cape fluttering behind him in the evening breeze. Saturday, Midoriya. Wear something athletic. And try to look less like a nervous wreck. Confidence is the first layer of defense. Izuku watched him go until he disappeared around the corner. For the first time that day, for the first time in years, Izuku Midoriya stood up straight. He rolled his shoulders back. He took a deep breath. The smell of sewage and smoke still lingered in the air, but beneath it, there was something else. A fresh start. He looked at his hands. They were still quirkless. They were still weak, but they were holding a thread. And he wasn't going to let go. 2 days later, the Saturday morning, Izuku stood in front of the massive glass building that housed the best Jeanist agency. It was 5:45 a.m. He had been here since 5:30. He was wearing a dark green tracksuit he had dug out of his closet. It was slightly too big for him. He had spent 20 minutes in front of the mirror trying to tame his hair, using half a bottle of gel, but the curls had fought back and won. It was a compromise at best. He clutched his yellow backpack straps, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. What if he changed his mind? What if this was a joke? What if I walk in there and he laughs at me? The automatic doors slid open. A sidekick with hair shaped like a literal pair of scissors stepped out. Midoriya? Why yes. Izuku squeaked. Jeanist is waiting in the training hall. Follow me. The interior of the agency was intimidatingly clean. Everything was white, chrome, or denim blue. It smelled of starch and expensive cologne. Izuku felt like he was tracking dirt onto the floor just by existing. They reached a large double door at the end of a corridor. The sidekick opened it and gestured for Izuku to enter. The room was vast. It looked less like a gym and more like a torture chamber designed by a fashion designer. There were climbing ropes, balance beams, mannequins, and spools of wire the size of cars. In the center of the room, Best Jeanist sat on a folding chair, reading a fashion magazine. He was wearing a simplified version of his hero costume, sleeveless, revealing arms that were surprisingly muscular, lean, ropey muscle. He looked up as Izuku entered. He checked his watch. 5:58 a.m., Jeanist said. Early. Acceptable. He stood up, closing the magazine. He walked over to Izuku, circling him again. The tracksuit is ill-fitting, Jeanist critiqued immediately. It bags at the knees. It creates drag. And the hair, well, we will work on it. Good morning, Best Jeanist, sir. Izuku bowed deeply. Up, Jeanist ordered. Head high. Eyes forward. A hero looks at the threat, not the floor. Izuku snapped his head up, locking eyes with the pro. Tell me, Midoriya, Jeanist said, clasping his hands behind his back. Why do you think I chose you? Izuku swallowed. Because I moved? Because I tried to save Kaken? That is the spark, Jeanist nodded. But sparks burn out. I chose you because you are a blank slate. You have no bad habits formed by a reliance on a quirk. Most students I see, even the ones at UA, are lazy. They let their powers do the heavy lifting. If you take away their fire, or their hardness, or their speed, they crumble. Jeanist stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. You have nothing to lose, Midoriya. And because of that, you have everything to gain. If I can teach a quirkless boy to stand shoulder to shoulder with gods, then I will have proven my philosophy, that the man makes the hero, not the power. Jeanist walked over to a table and picked up a spool of thin, silver wire. He tossed it to Izuku. Izuku fumbled, barely catching it. It was heavy. What is this? High-tensile carbon fiber, Jeanist said. It can hold a ton of weight, but it cuts like a razor if you mishandle it. It is not a quirk. It is a tool. From today on, this is your power. Izuku looked at the spool. The wire glinted in the harsh gym lights. I cannot give you super strength, Jeanist said, walking to the center of the mats. I cannot give you explosions. But I can teach you to bind. To trip. To redirect. To control. I can teach you to turn an opponent's strength against them. Jeanist assumed a fighting stance. It was elegant, fluid, like a dancer. Put down the bag, Midoriya. The runway is open. Izuku dropped his backpack. The heavy thud echoed in the room. He gripped the spool of wire. It felt cold. It felt real. Yes, sir! Izuku shouted, his voice finally finding its footing. Good, Best Jeanist smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Now, let us begin with the basics. First, we must fix that atrocious knot in your shoelaces. If you trip, you die. Izuku looked down at his shoes. Style, Midoriya, Jeanist said, launching a single denim thread that whipped Izuku's ankle, forcing him into a proper stance. Style is survival. Never forget that. Izuku gritted his teeth, holding the stance despite the burn in his legs. He wasn't All Might's successor. He wasn't the symbol of peace. He was the loose thread. And he was about to become the strongest fiber in the world. The alarm clock buzzed at 5 a.m., a harsh, electric sound that sliced through the silence of the Midoriya apartment. Normally Izuku Midoriya would have hit snooze. He would have buried his face in his All Might pillow, groaning about the unfairness of mourning, and dragged himself out of bed at the last possible second to sprint to school with toast in his mouth. Not anymore. Izuku's hand shot out, silencing the alarm before the second buzz. He sat up. His body screamed. Every muscle fiber, from his trapezius to his calves, felt like it had been pulled apart and stitched back together by a blind surgeon. He groaned, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. As his feet touched the floor, he caught his reflection in the full-length mirror his mother had bought him a week ago. He stood up. He felt the urge to hunch, to curl inward, protecting his soft underbelly from a world that liked to kick him. Posture, Midoriya. A hero does not slouch. Slouching is a visual admission of defeat. The voice of Best Jeanist echoed in his head, cool and critical. Izuku forced his shoulders back. He lifted his chin. He took a deep breath, ignoring the ache in his abs. I am here, he whispered to the mirror. It wasn't the booming baritone of All Might. It was softer, sharper. I am awake. Month 1, the raw material. The Best Jeanist agency was less a superhero office and more a cathedral dedicated to the god of perfection. The floors were polished marble that looked like water. The walls were adorned with modern art that Izuku didn't understand but assumed was expensive. Even the air smelled different, crisp, like fresh linen and ozone. Izuku stood in the center of the private training dojo, wearing a skin-tight gray bodysuit that Jeanist had insisted upon. It reveals the flaws in your form, Jeanist had said. Baggy clothes hide mistakes. We do not hide mistakes here. We iron them out. Currently Izuku was upside down. He was suspended from the ceiling by 3 thick denim cables wrapped around his ankles and waist. His face was purple with blood rush. Control your breathing, Jeanist's voice drifted up from below. The number 4 hero was walking around the mat, holding a riding crop that he used to point out errors. You are panicking. I can see it in your trapezius muscles. They are bunched up like cheap polyester. I can't feel my legs, Izuku wheezed. Good. That means you are relying on your core, Jeanist said calmly. Now the knot. Again. Izuku reached up, or down, relative to gravity, toward a dangling rope. His task was simple: tie a specific, complex knot, the double carrick bend, while suspended, using only one hand and his teeth, within 10 seconds. It was impossible. A hero often finds themselves in inverted, uncomfortable, or compromised positions, Jeanist lectured. If you cannot function while uncomfortable, you cannot save anyone. Villains do not wait for you to find your footing. Izuku's fingers fumbled with the rope. His vision swam. Loop over, tuck under, pull through. Time, Jeanist said. Izuku dropped the rope. It unraveled instantly. Failure. Drop him, Jeanist commanded the air. The denim cables released. Izuku plummeted 10 feet. He didn't scream. He'd learned that screaming earned him extra laps, and instead tucked his chin, rolled as he hit the mat, and dispersed the impact. It wasn't graceful, but he didn't break anything. He lay on the mat, gasping for air. Your landing was a 4 out of 10, Jeanist critiqued, standing over him. You looked like a sack of potatoes falling off a truck. Where is the elegance? Where is the flow? I'm trying, Izuku coughed. Try harder, Jeanist said, though his tone wasn't angry. It was matter-of-fact. You have spent 14 years apologizing for your existence, Midoriya. You walk small. You talk small. You shrink. Jeanist knelt, his denim collar obscuring his mouth, but his eyes intense. You are quirkless. In the eyes of society, that makes you lesser. If you fight like a brawler, you will lose. You do not have the durability to trade blows. You cannot be a hammer. You must be a needle. Jeanist stood up and offered a hand. A needle does not smash through resistance. It slips through the gaps. It is precise. It is sharp. And it is unbreakable if applied at the correct angle. Get up. Izuku took the hand. He was pulled to his feet. Again, Jeanist said. The knot. 10 seconds. Month 2, the theory of fashion. Izuku sat in the agency's break room, a pile of textbooks in front of him. But they weren't math or history books, the physics of tension, textile strength and application, anatomy of human motion. Vogue, 100 years of style. I don't understand why I have to read the fashion magazines, Izuku muttered, highlighting a paragraph about tensile stress limits in carbon fiber. Aesthetics are psychological warfare, said a voice from the doorway. Izuku jumped. It was a sidekick, a woman with hair that flowed like silk ribbons. Her hero name was Velour. Jeanist believes that a hero's appearance dictates the civilian response, Velour explained, pouring herself a coffee. Think about All Might. Why does he smile? To show he's strong, Izuku recited. To trick the fear inside him. Partially, Velour nodded. But also to project a symbol. I am here so you are safe. Now, think about Endeavor. What does he project? Power, Izuku said. Intimidation. He scares villains. Exactly. Now you? She pointed a manicured finger at him. You have no quirk. If you show up to a disaster scene looking like a nervous child in a homemade costume, what will the civilians feel? Izuku looked down. Panic. They'll think I can't save them. Correct. And panic causes chaos. Chaos gets people killed. Velour sat down opposite him. Jeanist's style isn't just about vanity. It's about control. When he arrives, he looks immaculate. He looks unbothered. People see him and think, if he's that calm, the situation must be under control. It acts as a sedative. She tapped the stack of magazines. You need to find your silhouette, Midoriya. You need to learn how to stand so that when people look at you, they don't see quirkless. They see professional. Izuku looked at the magazine cover. A model stood on a cliff edge, windblown but stoic. Fake it till you make it, Izuku thought. But I can't just fake it. I have to believe it. That afternoon, training changed. Jeanist didn't make him do push-ups. He made him walk, back and forth across the dojo. 4 hours. Shoulders back, Jeanist called out, clapping his hands in a rhythm. Chin level. Don't look at your feet. The ground isn't going anywhere. Make eye contact with the horizon. Glide, Midoriya, don't stomp. You are not a Clydesdale, you are a panther. It was exhausting. Mental exhaustion was worse than physical. Every step was a conscious decision to overwrite a lifetime of submission. By the end of the session, Izuku was walking differently. His stride was longer. His head was steady. Better, Jeanist noted, marking something on a clipboard. You no longer look like a victim. Now you look like a civilian with good posture. We are making progress. Month 3, the Gadgeteer. So, you're the project. Izuku blinked. He was in the RD basement of the agency. The room was cluttered with spools of wire, half-disassembled gadgets, and mannequins wrapped in various fabrics. Standing in front of him was a short, frantic-looking man with goggles magnified so much his eyes looked like tennis balls. I'm Izuku Midoriya. I know. The quirkless wonder. Jeanist sent down the specs. I thought he was joking. No quirk factor? Literally zero? The man grabbed Izuku's arm and poked the muscle. Decent definition starting to form. But you're human standard. Boring. I'm Stitch, the man said, releasing him. Head engineer. Jeanist wants me to build you a delivery system. He says, give the boy claws that can bind. He's very poetic. A pain in the ass, but poetic. Stitch rummaged through a workbench and pulled out a prototype. It looked clunky, a metal gauntlet with a bulky cylinder on the forearm. This, Stitch said, is the Mark I spool gauntlet. It's basically a high-speed winch strapped to your arm. He strapped it onto Izuku's left arm. It was heavy, carbon fiber wire, Stitch explained. 3,000 meters of it compressed into this cartridge. It's thinner than human hair but has the tensile strength of steel cabling. If you run into it fast enough, it'll slice you to ribbons. If you wrap it right, it'll stop a truck. How do I control it? Izuku asked, admiring the mechanism. Fingertip sensors. Stitch pointed to the glove. You twitch your fingers in specific patterns to extend, retract, lock, and cut. It's like playing a piano. If the piano could accidentally amputate your nose. Izuku flexed his fingers. The gauntlet whirred softly. A silver thread shot out, embedding itself in a wooden target on the wall. Whoa, Izuku breathed. Don't get excited yet, Stitch warned. Retract. Izuku twitched his ring finger. The winch screamed, and his arm was yanked forward with violent force. He face-planted into the workbench. Ow. Physics, kid, Stitch laughed, tapping his temple. Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. If you pull the wall pulls you. Since the wall is bolted down, and you weigh 60 kilos soaking wet, you lose. For the next month, Izuku didn't see the sun. He lived in the training dojo with the gauntlets. He learned about friction. He learned about fulcrums. He learned that if he fired the wire at a 90-degree angle while running, the centrifugal force would swing him. But only if he braced his core. If he didn't brace, he dislocated his shoulder. He dislocated his shoulder twice. Jeanist popped it back in both times with a terrifying efficiency. He covered the walls of his bedroom with diagrams. Vector calculus. Trigonometry. He had to calculate the swing trajectory in his head in split seconds. If I attach to point A at 40 kilometers per hour, and the wire length is 10 meters, my arc will carry me to point B, unless I shorten the wire mid-swing to increase velocity. It was math. It was analysis. It was everything Izuku was good at, finally applied to combat. Month 5, the clash of textiles. Aldred Junior High was the same as always. Loud, crowded, and judgmental. But Izuku was different. He walked down the hallway. He didn't hug the lockers. He walked down the center of the corridor. His uniform was pressed. Jeanist had given him a strict tutorial on ironing. His tie was a perfect Windsor knot. He felt eyes on him. Is that Deku? He looks taller. Did he get a haircut? Izuku ignored them. He kept his breathing even. In, out. Evaluate the environment. No threats. He turned the corner, and nearly collided with a wall of muscle. Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo stopped. His red eyes narrowed. He had been watching Izuku for months. He had seen the early morning runs. He had noticed the calluses on Izuku's hands. He had noticed the lack of stuttering, and it pissed him off. Deku, Bakugo growled. Smoke curled from his palms. Good morning, Kaken, Izuku said. His voice was steady. Not provocative, just calm. Don't look down on me, Bakugo hissed, stepping into Izuku's personal space. He slammed a hand against the lockers next to Izuku's head. Bang! Normally Izuku would have flinched. He would have cowered, but Izuku didn't blink. He watched Bakugo's shoulder. Deltoid tensed. Weight shifted to the right foot. He's posturing, not striking. It's an intimidation display. I'm not looking down on you, Izuku said. I'm looking at you. You think you're hot stuff because you're playing dress-up with that denim fairy? Bakugo sneered. I heard you're sweeping floors at his agency. Do you think that makes you a hero? I'm learning, Izuku said. Just like you're learning to prepare for UA. I don't need to learn. Bakugo shouted, popping an explosion near Izuku's ear. I'm a natural. You're a pebble. A pebble stays on the side of the road. Bakugo swung his other hand, a right hook aimed at Izuku's shoulder, meant to shove him hard. Izuku moved. It wasn't a block. It wasn't a counterattack. Izuku simply shifted his weight. He pivoted on his left heel, dropping his center of gravity by 3 inches and rotating his torso. Bakugo's fist sailed through the empty air where Izuku's shoulder had been a millisecond ago. Bakugo stumbled, his momentum carrying him forward. He caught himself, spinning around, eyes wide with shock. Izuku was standing 2 feet away, hands by his sides, posture perfect. Your swing was wide, Izuku said quietly. You telegraphed it with your footwork. The hallway went silent. Students gaped. Deku had just dodged. Bakugo's face turned a shade of red that defied color theory. You damn nerd! He raised his hands for a real explosion. Ring! The school bell rang. Izuku adjusted his backpack straps. We'll be late for English, Kaken. He turned and walked away, presenting his back to the explosive boy. It was a risk. But it was also a statement. I am not afraid of you anymore. Behind him, Bakugo stood frozen, smoke sizzling from his palms, confused by the sudden shift in the universe's gravity. Month 7, the rubbish heap. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. A graveyard of trash. It is disgusting, Best Jeanist said, holding a handkerchief to his nose. He was standing on the seawall, looking down at the mountains of refrigerators, tires, and scrap metal. All Might cleaned a section of this, Izuku said, pointing to a small clear patch in the distance. I saw it on the news. All Might hauled trash, Jeanist corrected. He used brute strength to move mass. We are not here to clean, Midoriya. We are here to navigate. Jeanist gestured to the chaotic piles of junk. This is a villain base. It is unstable. It is jagged. It is complex. Your objective is to traverse from this end of the beach to the other without touching the sand. Izuku looked at the gauntlet on his left arm. He now had a matching one on his right. The floor is lava? Izuku asked. The floor is death, Jeanist corrected. If you touch the sand, you die. If you knock over a pile and create a noise louder than 50 decibels, you die. Stealth. Precision. Mobility. Go. Izuku took a breath. He aimed his right gauntlet at the handle of a washing machine protruding from a pile 20 feet away. Click. Whir. The wire shot out, wrapping tight. Izuku jumped. He engaged the winch, pulling himself through the air. For the first few months, he would have smashed into the washing machine. Now, as he approached the impact point, he fired his left gauntlet at a higher point, a lamppost sticking out of a pile of tires. He released the right wire. The momentum transferred. He swung upward in an arc. Physics. Tension. Release. He soared over a rusted truck. He landed lightly on the hood, his knees bending to absorb the sound. Thump. Soft. Too loud, Jeanist called out from the wall. You sound like a falling piano. Lighter. Izuku didn't stop. He ran along the truck, jumped, fired 2 wires simultaneously to create a V-shape anchor, and vaulted through a gap between 2 mounds of trash. It was exhilarating. He wasn't flying like All Might. He wasn't blasting like Bakugo. He was weaving. He was a spider, dancing on a web of his own making. Midway through the course, a pile shifted. A refrigerator groaned and began to slide, threatening to cause an avalanche of scrap. Izuku was midair. He saw the slide. Analyze. If the fridge falls, the pile collapses. I fall. I fail. He fired a wire at the falling fridge. He fired another at a sturdy concrete pillar to his left. He engaged the locks. The wire pulled taut. The fridge jerked to a halt, suspended by the tension. The avalanche stopped. Izuku swung past the stabilized hazard, landing on a clear patch of plastic. Impressive, Jeanist murmured, watching through binoculars. Improvisational structural engineering. Izuku reached the end of the beach, panting, sweating, but grinning. Time? He called out. 4 minutes, 12 seconds, Jeanist said, checking his watch. Acceptable. But your left elbow was flaring out during the swing. It creates drag. Yes, sir. Izuku beamed. Jeanist walked down the stairs to the beach, his shoes avoiding the grime with supernatural luck. Midoriya, he said. Do you know why I wear denim? Izuku blinked, surprised by the personal question. Because it's tough? Because it is the fabric of the people, Jeanist said, touching his collar. It is workwear. It is durable. It ages with you. It is not silk. It is not velvet. It is common. He looked at Izuku. You are common, Midoriya. You were born without a gift. You are the denim of the hero world. Rough. Standard. But woven correctly? You can endure more wear and tear than any silk cape. Jeanist placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. You are no longer a loose thread. You are becoming a tapestry. I am proud of your progress. Izuku felt a lump in his throat. All Might had told him to dream realistically. Best Jeanist had told him to work. And now, the work was real. Thank you, Sensei. Izuku bowed, creating a perfect 45-degree angle. Your tie is crooked again, Jeanist sighed. But the bow was respectable. Month 9, the home front. The doorbell rang at the Midoriya household. Inko Midoriya wiped her hands on her apron and rushed to the door. Coming! She opened it and froze. Standing in her hallway, holding a fruit basket wrapped in impeccable blue cellophane, was the number 4 hero. Mrs. Midoriya, Best Jeanist said, bowing politely. I apologize for the intrusion. I trust one am not interrupting dinner? BB Best Jeanist? Inko shrieked, nearly fainting. Izuku! Izuku, it's your boss. I mean, your teacher. I mean, oh my goodness, come in. Please, sorry about the mess. There was no mess. Inko was a meticulous cleaner. Jeanist entered, stepping out of his shoes. Your home is lovely, madam. The decor is cozy. Izuku emerged from his room, wearing a casual shirt that actually fit him. Sensei? What are you doing here? A progress report, Jeanist said, handing the fruit basket to a trembling Inko. And a reassurance. They sat at the small dining table. Inko served tea, her hands shaking so much the cups rattled on the saucers. Mrs. Midoriya, Jeanist began, taking a sip of tea. I understand you have reservations about Izuku's path. He is quirkless. The profession is dangerous. Inko looked down, her eyes tearing up. I just don't want him to get hurt. He's so fragile. Every time he comes home with a bruise or a scrape, I feel like I failed him. I couldn't give him a power to protect himself. Izuku reached out and took his mother's hand. Mom, you are correct, Jeanist said. You did not give him a power. Inko flinched. You gave him a heart, Jeanist continued softly. And you gave him a brain. Those are rare commodities in my line of work. Jeanist set the cup down. I cannot promise you he will not be hurt. That would be a lie. But I can promise you this. I am teaching him to be the hardest target in the world. He is not learning to break bones. He is learning to not be there when the punch lands. Jeanist looked at Izuku. He is talented, Mrs. Midoriya. Not in the way society expects, but in a way that matters. He has a stylist's eye for detail. He sees the world in patterns. He is going to be a great hero. Not a powerful one, perhaps, but a great one. Inko looked at her son. She saw the change. The way he sat. The calm in his eyes. He wasn't the crying boy who watched the computer video of All Might on loop anymore. He was a young man. Okay, Inko whispered, squeezing Izuku's hand. Okay. Just, please make sure he dresses warmly. The nights are getting cold. Jeanist smiled, a genuine, warm expression. On my honor as a fashionista, he will always be dressed appropriately for the occasion. Month 10, the masterpiece. The day before the UA entrance exam, the training dojo was cleared. The mats were empty. Today is the final test, Jeanist announced. Izuku stood at one end of the room. He was wearing his full gear. The gauntlets were polished. He wore a utility belt containing smoke bombs, caltrops, and a small first aid kit. He wore combat boots with reinforced soles. Your opponent, Jeanist said, gesturing to the door, is Valor. The sidekick stepped in. She wasn't holding back. Her quirk allowed her to turn her skin into a frictionless fabric, making her incredibly fast and hard to grab. Objective, capture, Jeanist said. Begin. Valor moved. She was a blur of purple and black. She slid across the floor like it was ice, aiming a kick at Izuku's head. Izuku dropped. He didn't block, he slid under the kick. As he slid, he fired his right gauntlet at the ceiling. Zip. He retracted the wire, launching himself upward. He was now upside down, hanging 5 meters in the air. Valor skidded to a halt, looking up. You can't stay up there forever, kid. I don't need to, Izuku called down. He fired his left gauntlet. Not at Valor, but at a rack of heavy medicine balls in the corner. Yank. The rack tipped. A dozen heavy leather balls spilled out, rolling chaotically across the floor. Valor dodged them easily. Distraction? Weak. Not distraction, Izuku whispered. Terrain modification. He dropped. As he fell, he fired multiple wires, thwip, 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 attaching them to the rolling balls and the wall anchors. In 3 seconds, he had created a tripwire web at ankle height, moving and shifting with the momentum of the balls. Velour tried to slide, but her frictionless skin didn't help when her ankles were snagged by high-tension wire. She tripped, her momentum sending her tumbling. Izuku landed softly. He didn't punch. He fired both gauntlets, wrapping Velour in a cocoon of carbon fiber before she could recover. Restrain. He pulled the wires taut. Velour was suspended mid-air, bound hand and foot. Yield? Izuku asked, breathless. Velour struggled for a second, then laughed. Okay. I yield. Nice web, Spider-Man. Jeanist clapped. A slow, rhythmic applause. Excellent, Jeanist said. You used the environment. You anticipated the opponent's mobility. And you executed the bind without causing unnecessary injury. He walked over to Izuku. You are ready. Jeanist snapped his fingers. Stitch ran in, carrying a long garment bag. For the exam, Jeanist said, taking the bag. You cannot wear a tracksuit. It is pedestrian. He unzipped the bag. Inside was a jumpsuit. It was teal green, a homage to Izuku's mother's favorite color, but the material was high-tech. Reinforced Kevlar weave masked as heavy denim. It had a high collar, Jeanist's influence, that could be pulled up as a mask. The belt was red utility leather. The knee and elbow pads were sleek, black carbon plating. It was practical. It was durable. It was stylish. A hero's costume is their brand, Jeanist said. This says you are efficient. You are prepared. Izuku touched the fabric. It felt cool and strong. Thank you, Izuku choked out. Thank you for everything. Do not thank me yet, Jeanist said sternly. You have only finished the tutorial. The real runway is tomorrow. UA High School. Jeanist turned to leave, but stopped at the door. Midoriya. Yes, sir? When you walk through those gates, do not walk like All Might. Do not walk like me. Jeanist looked back, his eyes serious. Walk like Izuku Midoriya, the boy who weaves his own future. The next morning, the gates of UA High stood massive and imposing under the blue sky. Hundreds of students were streaming in, chatting nervously. Izuku Midoriya stepped off the train. He wore his school uniform, but he wore it differently now. The blazer sat perfectly on his shoulders. The buttons were shined. His green hair was still wild, but it looked intentional, windswept rather than messy. He checked his wrist. The gauntlets were concealed under his sleeves, legal support items he had registered weeks ago. He walked toward the gate. He saw a girl with brown hair trip on a loose cobblestone. Gravity took hold. She began to fall. Izuku didn't panic. He didn't rush. His hand shot out. A tiny, almost invisible wire zipped from his sleeve, tagged the back of her blazer, and pulled gently, correcting her center of gravity. She wobbled, then found her footing, looking around in confusion. Huh! I thought I was gonna fall. Izuku retracted the wire with a flick of his finger. Click. He walked past her, offering a polite nod. Careful. The stones are uneven. He didn't stop to stutter. He didn't blush. He kept walking. Bakugo was ahead of him, yelling at someone to get out of his way. Izuku smiled, a small, sharp smile. The loose thread is here, he thought. And I'm ready to stitch this exam up. He stepped through the gates of UA, not as a fanboy, but as a contender. The auditorium at UA High School was vast, designed to make prospective students feel small. The tiered seating was filled with the nervous energy of thousands of teenagers, a collective hum of anxiety that vibrated against the acoustic paneling. Izuku Midoriya sat in row F, seat 14. He sat perfectly still. His spine was aligned against the back of the chair. His feet were flat on the floor, shoulder-width apart. His hands rested on his knees, fingers relaxed but ready. While other students fidgeted, tapped their feet, or whispered to their neighbors, Izuku was practicing breathing exercises. In for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. Out for 4. He was analyzing the room, but not in the frantic, muttering way he used to. His eyes scanned the crowd, picking out details that others missed. The boy 3 rows down has oversized forearms, likely a strength enhancer type. He's slouching, putting pressure on his lower lumbar. He'll be slow to start. The girl to the left has acid burns on her fingertips. Emitter type. Dangerous at range, but her jacket is loose material, easy to snag. Izuku adjusted his collar. He wasn't wearing the standard middle school uniform anymore. Per the exam regulations, students were allowed to wear gear that facilitated their quirks or physical abilities, provided it was registered. Izuku wore a dark teal tracksuit, tailored within an inch of its life. It wasn't baggy. It fit like a second skin, reinforced at the elbows and knees with abrasion-resistant patches. On his wrists sat the spool gauntlets. The Mark II versions, sleeker and lighter than the prototypes, painted a matte gunmetal gray to avoid reflecting sunlight. Welcome to today's live performance. Present Mick's voice exploded from the speakers, shattering Izuku's concentration. The voice hero stood on the stage, posing dramatically. Everybody say hey. Silence. Keeping it mellow? That's cool, my listeners. I'm here to give you the lowdown on how this practical exam is gonna go down. Are you ready? As President Mike launched into the explanation of the 3 robot types, Izuku pulled a small notebook from his pocket. He didn't scribble furiously. He made concise, bulleted notes. 1 pointer, fast, light armor. Strategy, trip and bind. 2 pointer, medium armor, ranged attacks. Strategy, blind optics, disable weaponry. 3 pointer, heavy, slow. Strategy, avoid direct confrontation. Use environmental hazards. Excuse me, may I ask a question? A hand shot up in the middle of the auditorium. Spotlight. A tall boy with glasses and a severe haircut stood up. There are 4 types of villains listed on the handout. The boy announced, pointing accusingly at the stage. If this is a printing error, then UA, the most prestigious school in Japan, should be ashamed. We are here to be molded into exemplary heroes. He spun around, pointing a finger directly at the row behind him. And you? The one with the curly hair and the gauntlets. Izuku blinked. The boy was pointing at him. You've been sitting there staring at everyone like a hawk this entire time. It's distracting. If you're just here to size up the competition rather than focus on the presentation, then you should leave immediately. The auditorium went quiet. Hundreds of eyes turned to Izuku. In the past, Izuku would have melted. He would have stammered, apologized, and tried to shrink into a subatomic particle. But Best Jeanist's voice was louder than his insecurity. When challenged, do not fray. Hold your tension. A hero is always on display. Izuku stood up. His movement was smooth, almost mechanical. He adjusted his cuff. I apologize if my focus disturbed you, Izuku said. His voice wasn't loud, but he projected it clearly, using his diaphragm just as he'd been taught during press training. However, looking at the competition is necessary. In the field, knowing who is beside you is just as important as knowing the enemy. I was merely assessing the pattern of the weave. He bowed slightly, a polite, measured incline of the head, and sat back down. The boy with glasses, Tenya Ida, looked stunned. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then bowed stiffly toward the stage. Thank you? I apologize for the interruption. Present Mike laughed nervously. Okay. Examinee 7111 is right. Cool your jets, listener. The 4th villain is a 0-pointer. Think of it as a hurdle you're supposed to avoid. It's got no points, so it's just there to cause chaos. Izuku narrowed his eyes. A hurdle to avoid? Or a test of priorities? The battle center, Gate B. The bus ride to the testing ground was silent. Izuku stood near the doors, checking the tension on his winches. Whir. Click. Lock. The systems were green. He stepped off the bus and looked up at the massive gates of Battle Center B. It was an entire mock city, skyscrapers and all. It's huge, said a voice beside him. Izuku turned. It was the brunette girl he had saved from tripping earlier, Ochako Uraraka. She was wearing a pink and black tracksuit, looking nervous. It simulates an urban density of 80%, Izuku said. Plenty of anchor points. Anchor points? She asked, tilting her head. Oh. Izuku realized he was slipping into jargon. He offered a small, practiced smile. I mean, places to attach wires. For maneuvering. Right. You're the wire guy. She beamed, pumping a fist. I'm Uraraka. Good luck out there. Let's do our best, Midoriya, he replied. Likewise. Start. Present Mick's voice blared from the tower high above. What's wrong? There's no countdown in a real fight. Run! Run! The die has been cast. While the other students hesitated, processing the lack of a countdown, Izuku was already moving. He didn't sprint like a runner on a track. He moved with a low center of gravity, his arms slightly out. He launched himself through the opening gates before anyone else took a step. Speed is essential. I can't compete with raw power, so I need to be the first to the engagement zone. He dashed down the main street of the mock city. The sound of heavy machinery grinding to life echoed from the alleys. Target acquired. A one-pointer, a wheelbase robot with machine guns for arms, rolled out from behind a convenience store. Target located, the robot droned. Izuku didn't stop. He raised his left arm. Snap! A carbon fiber line shot from his gauntlet, tagging a lamppost directly behind the robot. Izuku kept running past the robot. As he passed it, he fired his right gauntlet, tagging the robot's central chassis. He engaged the winch on his left arm, pulling himself hard into a turn. The wire connecting him to the robot went taut. Clothesline. Izuku used his own momentum as a counterweight. He whipped around the lamppost. The wire caught the robot's wheel axle. The sheer force of Izuku's velocity, multiplied by the leverage of the turn, yanked the robot off balance. It spun out, crashing violently into the wall of the convenience store. Sparks flew. Its optical lens shattered. Izuku retracted his wires instantly. One down. Maybe. He paused to check. The robot was sparking, trying to reboot, but its axle was bent. It wasn't destroyed, but it was immobilized. Does that count? A laser beam shot past his head. A majestic, sparkling boy with a naval laser blasted the robot's head off. Merci for the setup, monsieur. Izuku gritted his teeth. Kill steal. The exam judge's destruction, Jeanist had warned him. Immobilization is heroic, but academia often favors the flashy. You must ensure they cannot get back up. Izuku took off running again. The city became a war zone. Explosions rocked the streets. Buildings crumbled. Izuku found himself in a difficult position. He wasn't a destroyer. He was a trapper. He swung around a corner, while running for 3 steps before launching himself onto a fire escape. Below him, two-pointers were cornering a student with a tail. Izuku analyzed the geometry. 2 targets. Narrow alley. Overhead cables. He leaped from the fire escape. Mid-air, he crossed his arms, firing both gauntlets at the opposing walls of the alley, creating a horizontal line just above the robot's head height. He landed on the ground between them and the tailed student. Hey! Izuku shouted. Over here! The robots turned their turrets toward him. They lunged. Izuku dropped flat onto his back. The robots charged forward, their heads catching the high-tension wire Izuku had just strung up. Clang! The wire didn't break. The robots did. The force of their own charge against the unbreakable carbon fiber sheared their sensor arrays clean off. They collapsed, twitching. The tailed boy stared. Whoa! Thanks. Go! Izuku shouted, retracting his wires. They might reboot. Izuku checked his mental tally. Maybe 10 points? 15? It's not enough. People like Kaken will have 50 by now. He needed to be faster. He needed to be more aggressive. He swung up to the rooftops. Verticality is my advantage. They're all fighting on the ground. From the roof, he spotted a 3-pointer, a massive, tank-treaded beast, rampaged down a wide avenue. Students were scattering. Izuku ran to the edge of the roof. He calculated the distance. Launch. Swing. Dismantle. He jumped. He fired a line at a crane overlooking the street. He swung in a wide pendulum arc, gaining terrifying speed. As he reached the bottom of the arc, skimming just feet above the 3-pointer's head, he released the crane line and fired 2 short bursts directly onto the robot's shoulder joints. He didn't pull. He simply wrapped the wire around the joints as he flew past, weaving it through the exposed hydraulics. He landed on a balcony on the opposite side of the street and yanked. The wires, threaded through the moving parts, acted like a wrench in the gears. The hydraulics screamed. The metal buckled. The three-pointer's arms locked up, forcing them to grind against its own chassis. The robot shuddered and ground to a halt, smoke pouring from its joints. Technical knockout, Izuku whispered, wiping sweat from his forehead. That has to be at least 20 points. 6 minutes remaining, the panic set in. Only 6 minutes? He had maybe 30 points total if the judges were generous about his assists. He swung back into the fray. He tripped robots. He bound their treads. He blinded their sensors with adhesive-tipped wires. But every time he disabled one, someone with a flashy quirk would finish it off. I'm doing the work, and they're getting the credit. It was frustrating. It was the story of his life. The support beam that nobody noticed holding up the roof. Then, the ground shook. It wasn't a rumble. It was an earthquake. Dust billowed from the north end of the city. A shadow fell over the testing ground, blocking out the sun. Izuku looked up. And up. And up. The zero-pointer. It was bigger than the skyscrapers. It was a monstrosity of green metal, a god of destruction. Its mere movement shattered the pavement. Run! Someone screamed. The examinees broke. The heroes turned and fled. It was primal fear. There were no points to be gained here. Only death. Izuku felt the urge to run too. His legs trembled. Jeanist said to avoid unnecessary risks. This is a hurdle. You don't fight a hurricane. He turned to flee. Oh wow, a small voice. Barely audible over the grinding of the zero-pointer's treads. Izuku froze. His head snapped back. Through the dust, he saw her. The brunette girl. Uraraka. She was on the ground, her leg pinned under a massive slab of concrete that had fallen from a damaged building. The zero-pointer was approaching. It wasn't targeting her specifically. It was just rolling forward, indifferent to the ant beneath its boot. She tried to push the rock. Her fingers glowed, but she was exhausted. She couldn't lift it. The other students were running past her. Help! She cried out. Izuku's body moved before his brain gave permission. A hero weaves order out of chaos. Izuku sprinted toward the Titan. Midoriya, don't! He heard Ida shout from somewhere in the distance. Izuku ignored him. He ran straight into the dust cloud. He slid to a halt beside Uraraka. Can you use your quirk? He yelled over the noise. It's too heavy. She gasped, tears streaming down her face. I reached my limit. Izuku looked at the rock. It weighed at least 2 tons. Even with adrenaline, he couldn't lift it. He looked up. The zero-pointer's tread was 50 meters away and closing. Think. Mechanics. Leverage. He couldn't lift the rock. But he could make something else lift it. He looked at the environment. There was a sturdy steel I-beam protruding from the ruins of the building next to them, about 20 feet up. Fulcrum, cover your head! Izuku commanded. He raised both gauntlets. Whir. He fired 2 lines. One wrapped securely around the slab of concrete trapping Uraraka. The other shot up and wrapped around the protruding steel beam, but simply pulling wouldn't work. He needed mechanical advantage. Izuku ran. He ran away from the rock, unspooling wire, heading toward a heavy, immovable piece of debris, a fallen chunk of a bank vault. He looped the wire around a rebar protrusion on the vault, creating a makeshift pulley system. Force multiplier. Hold on! Izuku screamed. He didn't pull with his arms. He engaged the high-torque motors in the gauntlets. The winches screamed in protest. The wire went taut, vibrating with a terrifying hum. Come on! Come on! The wire cut into the concrete. The steel beam above groaned. The slab shifted. It wasn't enough. The zero-pointer was 20 meters away. The ground was shaking so hard Izuku could barely stand. He needed more power. He saw the zero-pointer's hand reaching down to crush a building. Use the enemy. Izuku made a split-second decision that would have given Best Jeanist a heart attack. He severed the line attached to the vault. He aimed his gauntlet at the zero-pointer's descending hand. Snap! The wire caught the giant robot's finger. Rising stitch! The robot's hand moved upward, retracting after its strike. Izuku braced himself, wrapping the wire around his waist to distribute the load. The immense power of the zero-pointer pulled the wire. The wire pulled the slab. Crack! The slab flew upward as if it weighed nothing, yanked by the godlike strength of the giant robot. Move! Izuku screamed. Uraraka rolled. She tumbled free of the trap just as the slab, released from tension, crashed back down a split second later. But they weren't safe. The robot was right on top of them. Izuku grabbed Uraraka by the back of her vest. Hang on! He fired a line at a building safely out of the robot's path. Retract. Max speed. The winch yanked them both sideways, dragging them across the pavement just as the zero-pointer's tread crushed the spot where they had been standing. They tumbled into an alleyway, a tangled mess of limbs and wire. Dust washed over them. The zero-pointer rolled past, its objective complete as the buzzer sounded. Time's up. The silence that followed was deafening. Izuku lay on his back, staring at the sky. His arms felt like they were on fire. The motors in his gauntlets were smoking. His teal jumpsuit was torn at the shoulder. Are you okay? Uraraka was hovering over him. Her face was dirty, but her eyes were huge. I think so, Izuku wheezed. Did you get hurt? You saved me, she whispered. You didn't run. Of course not, Izuku said, sitting up shakily. He checked his gauntlets. The left one was jammed. That's what heroes do. Recovery Girl arrived shortly after, handing out gummies. Reckless, she scolded Izuku, tapping his smoking gauntlets with her cane. You nearly tore your rotator cuffs. And look at this wire burn. You need to wear thicker padding if you're going to play tug-of-war with a giant robot. Sorry, Izuku smiled weakly. It was the only way. From the crowd of students, Ida watched. He adjusted his glasses. His hand was trembling. He didn't have a combat quirk, Ida thought. He used wires. He used physics. And he ran in when I ran away. Ida felt a wave of shame, and then, respect. 1 week later, the waiting was agony. Izuku spent the week at the agency, but the atmosphere was tense. Jeanist was busier than usual, dealing with a string of villain attacks in Shibuya, so Izuku was left to train with the sidekicks. He scrubbed the floors. He polished the mannequins. He practiced his knots until his fingers bled. I failed, he told himself every night. I didn't get enough points. I spent too much time setting up traps that others capitalized on. And the zero-pointer, that was 0 points. He sat at the dinner table, staring at a piece of fish. Izuku? Inko asked gently. You haven't touched your rice. I'm not hungry, Mom. Is it about the results? They should be here today. I know. Ding dong. Izuku jumped so hard he nearly knocked the table over. Inko rushed to the door. She came back holding a thick envelope with the UA seal. It's here, she whispered. Izuku took it. It felt heavy. He walked to his room. He sat at his desk, staring at the All Might poster on his wall. Then, he looked at the framed photo of him and Best Jeanist taken after he cleared the beach. Style over substance? Izuku muttered. Or substance over style? He tore the envelope open. A metal disc fell out. It clicked on the desk, projecting a hologram. I am here. As a projection, Izuku gasped. All Might? The number 1 hero was on the screen, wearing a yellow suit that clashed horribly with the blue background. Jeanist would have had a stroke. Young Midoriya. All Might boomed. You must be surprised. I am now a teacher at UA. It is a sudden development. All Might coughed, breaking character for a second, then resumed. Let's get to the point. The written exam. You passed with flying colors. A solid 96%. Impressive intelligence. Izuku nodded slowly. He knew he aced the written part. That wasn't the problem, but the practical. All Might leaned into the camera. You faced the villains with strategy. However, your villain's score was low. Very low. A number appeared on the screen. Villain points, 12. Izuku put his head in his hands. 12. That wasn't even close to the cutoff. He had disabled so many, but the final blows had gone to others. 12 points. All Might shouted. A failing grade. By standard metrics, you have failed. Izuku felt the tears welling up. He had wasted Jeanist's time. He had wasted the suit. However, All Might slammed his hand on the desk in the hologram. A hero course that rejects those who save others is a sham. The test is not just about destruction. It is about the heart. The video changed. It showed the footage of the zero-pointer. It showed the students running away. and it showed a teal blur sprinting toward the danger. It showed Izuku rigging the pulley. It showed him yanking the slab. It showed him pulling Uraraka to safety. This is the essence of heroism, All Might yelled. To risk one's life for another. You had nothing to gain. 0 points on the line. And yet you acted. A new number appeared next to the villain points. Rescue points, 60. Izuku stopped breathing. The judges were impressed. All Might continued. Ingenuity. Bravery. Self-sacrifice. 60 rescue points. A grand total of 72. The numbers flashed gold. Izuku Midoriya. You have passed. Come. This is your Hero Academia. The hologram faded. Izuku sat there stunned. The tears finally spilled over, hot and fast. I did it. I really did it. His phone buzzed on the desk. He picked it up. It was a text message from Best Jeanist. From Mentor. I saw the footage. Your use of the rising stitch on the 0-pointer was adequate. The pulley system showed good improvisation. Izuku smiled through his tears. That was high praise. Then, a second text arrived. From Mentor. However, during the rescue, your collar was popped on the left side only. It looked asymmetrical and sloppy. Fix it before the first day of class. Congratulations, Thread. Izuku laughed. He laughed until he hiccuped. He stood up and looked in the mirror. He wiped his eyes. He fixed his collar. I'll be ready, he promised. April. The first day. UA High School. Class 1A. Izuku stood outside the massive door. He could hear voices inside. This is it. The real start. He opened the door. Don't put your feet on the desk. Ha! Who are you to tell me what to do, Four Eyes? It was Ida and Bakugo. Of course. Ida saw Izuku enter. He froze. You! Ida marched over. The class went silent. Bakugo glared at Izuku, his eyes twitching. Midoriya! Ida announced. I misjudged you. During the exam, you perceived the true nature of the test while I was blinded by the surface rules. You are a superior candidate. I apologize. He bowed stiffly. Izuku blinked. Oh. It's okay, Ida. I just did what I had to do. Decent hair, said a voice from the back. Izuku looked. It was a boy with dual-colored hair, red and white. Shoto Todoroki. He was looking at Izuku with mild interest. Thanks, Izuku said, touching his hair, which Jeanist had spent 20 minutes styling that morning. Hey! It's Deku! Uraraka appeared behind him, beaming. You made it! I knew you would! That rescue was amazing. You're the one who passed, Izuku said, smiling. I just helped. Suddenly, the door slid open again. A yellow sleeping bag wriggled into the room. A face peeked out. Tired eyes, messy hair, stubble. Shota Aizawa. Eraserhead. The class quieted down, confused. Aizawa unzipped the bag and stood up. He scanned the room. His eyes landed on Izuku. He paused. He looked at Izuku's posture. He looked at the utility belt Izuku was wearing. Jeanist insisted on being prepared at all times. He looked at the perfectly tied tie. Aizawa smirked. A tiny, barely visible movement. So, Aizawa muttered. Jeanist actually pulled it off. He pulled a gym uniform out of his bag. I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Put these on and meet me on the field. We're doing a quirk apprehension test. The class gasped. But what about orientation? Uraraka asked. Irrational, Aizawa said. Heroes don't have time for ceremonies. He turned to leave, but glanced back at Izuku. Midoriya. Yes, sir? Izuku stood at attention. You don't have a quirk, Aizawa stated. The class murmured. Most hadn't realized. No, sir, Izuku said clearly. Then show me, Aizawa said, his eyes flashing red, how you intend to keep up without breaking. Izuku adjusted his gauntlets under his uniform. I intend to weave my way through, sir, Aizawa huffed. Logical. Now move. Izuku grabbed the uniform and followed the class. The fabric of his destiny was laid out before him. Now, he just had to sew it together, one stitch at a time. The boys' locker room at UA High smelled of fresh rubber, antiseptic cleaner, and the nervous sweat of 15-year-olds who had just realized the gravity of their situation. Izuku Midoriya stood by his locker, methodically stripping off his school uniform. He folded his blazer. He aligned the creases of his trousers. He placed his tie, perfectly knotted, atop the pile. It was a ritual of order, a way to center himself before the chaos. Around him, the other boys of Class 1A were changing with varying degrees of chaos. "Man, I'm pumped," said a redhead with shark-like teeth, pulling on his blue gym pants. "But also kinda terrified." "Did you hear about the teacher? Eraserhead? Sounds intense." "It is a logical progression," said the boy with glasses, Tenya Ida, waving his hand chop-style even while shirtless. "UA is the pinnacle of hero education. We must expect the unexpected." Izuku remained silent. He pulled on the navy blue UA gym uniform. It was standard issue, polyester blend, reinforced stitching, breathable mesh panels. Acceptable utility, but best Jeanist would have critiqued the fit around the shoulders. Then, Izuku reached into his bag and pulled out the boxes. The room went quiet for a beat. They were sleek, gunmetal gray cases. Izuku opened them, revealing the spool gauntlets. They gleamed under the fluorescent lights, the spools of carbon fiber wire wound tight, promising stored kinetic energy. He slid his arms into them. The magnetic locks engaged with a heavy thunk. He checked the sensors on his fingertips. "Green light." "Whoa," said a blond boy with a black lightning bolt in his hair, Denki Kaminari. "Nice support gear. What's your quirk? Something that needs aiming assistance?" Izuku paused. He tightened the strap on his left forearm. "I don't have a quirk," Izuku said. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of curiosity. It was the silence of a record scratch. Mineta, a small boy with great balls for hair, dropped his pants. "Huh! You're kidding, right? You can't be in the hero course without a quirk. That's like bringing a spoon to a gunfight." "Yeah," said the redhead Kirishima. "I thought the entrance exam required, like breaking robots? How did you do that without a power?" Izuku turned to face them. He didn't shrink. He didn't hunch. He stood with his feet shoulder-width apart, his chin lifted, his posture impeccable. "I use these," Izuku said, raising a gauntlet. "And I use my head. A spoon can be dangerous if you sharpen it enough." From the corner of the room, Katsuki Bakugo slammed his locker shut. The metal groaned under his grip. He didn't say a word. He just glared at the back of Izuku's head, his red eyes burning with a mixture of confusion and unadulterated rage. He brushed past Izuku, his shoulder checking Izuku's hard. Izuku didn't stumble. He rode the impact, shifting his weight to absorb the force, and adjusted his collar. "Let's go," Izuku said quietly. "We shouldn't keep him waiting. Being late is unfashionable." The P grounds. The sun was high, baking the dirt of the athletic fields. The air shimmered with heat. Shota Aizawa stood before them, looking like a man who had actively fought a war against sleep and lost. He wore all black, a long-sleeved shirt, baggy pants, and a strange, gray scarf wrapped loosely around his neck. He looked disheveled. He looked messy. To Izuku, trained by the most fastidious hero in Japan, Aizawa looked like a nightmare. But beneath the sloppiness, Izuku saw something else. He stands with his weight on the balls of his feet. His hands are hidden in his pockets, but his shoulders are loose. He's ready to attack at any second. And that scarf. Izuku narrowed his eyes. It's not just a scarf. It's a tool. A binding cloth. A carbon nanotube alloy woven into a textile? A quirk apprehension test? The class chorused in shock. "What about the entrance ceremony?" Uraraka asked, looking distressed. "And the guidance counselor meeting? If you're going to become a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events," Aizawa drawled, scratching his neck. UA's selling point is how unrestricted its school traditions are. That's also how the teachers run their classes. He stared at them with dead, dry eyes. "You kids have been doing these tests since junior high. 50-meter dash, grip strength, standing long jump, and so on. But you were never allowed to use your quirks. It's irrational. The Ministry of Education is procrastinating." Aizawa turned his gaze to Bakugo. "Bakugo, you finished first in the entrance exam. In junior high, what was your best result for the softball throw?" 67 meters, Bakugo grunted. Try doing it with your quirk. Bakugo stepped into the circle. He stretched his arms, a feral grin spreading across his face. Die! Die! Boom! The explosion was massive. A shockwave kicked up dust, and the ball rocketed into the stratosphere, leaving a trail of smoke. 705.2 meters, Aizawa read from his device. The class erupted. Awesome! That looks so fun! Pinky Ashido cheered. We can use our quirks as much as we want? Siro asked. This is gonna be great. Aizawa's expression darkened. The air temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Fun, huh? He lowered the device. You have 3 years to become a hero. Will you have an attitude like that the whole time? While people are dying? While villains are tearing the city apart? He grinned, a terrifying, predatory expression that stretched too wide across his face. All right. Whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential, and will be punished with expulsion. The cheer died instantly. Expulsion? Uraraka screamed. But it's the first day. That's too unreasonable. Natural disasters are unreasonable, Aizawa countered. Power-hungry villains are unreasonable. Catastrophic accidents are unreasonable. Japan is covered in unfairness. It is the job of a hero to overturn that unfairness. If you wanted to go hang out at Mickey D's with your friends, you're in the wrong place. He pointed a finger at the group. Welcome to the hero course. Izuku took a deep breath. High stakes. Just like the agency. Jeanist would expel a sidekick for a scuffed boot. This is standard. He looked at Aizawa. Aizawa looked back. For a second, their eyes met. Aizawa's gaze lingered on the gauntlets, then moved to Izuku's face. It was a look of cold assessment. He knows, Izuku thought. He knows I have nothing but these wires. He expects me to fail. Izuku adjusted his gloves. Let him look. I'll show him the strength of a well-tailored suit. Test 1, 50-meter dash. The track was straight, dusty, and unforgiving. First up were Ida and Azui. Ida's engines roared. He looked like a machine built for this exact purpose. On your mark. Get set. Bang. Ida vanished. Whoosh. 3.04 seconds. Azui hopped across. 5.58 seconds. Well, he's like a fish in water, Aizawa muttered. Izuku watched. I can't beat an engine. Physics won't allow it. But I can beat my own record. Next group. Midoriya Bakugo. Bakugo stepped to the line. He glared at Izuku. Don't trip on your shoelaces, Deku. Izuku ignored him. He walked to the line, but he didn't get into a sprinter's crouch. Instead, he turned around, facing away from the finish line. The class murmured. Midoriya? Kirishima called out. Wrong way, dude. Izuku raised his right arm. He aimed the gauntlet at the heavy metal starting block structure behind him. Whir. Click. The wire anchored. Izuku turned back around, walking forward until the wire was taut. He leaned forward, putting his entire body weight against the tension of the wire. The winch in his gauntlet hummed, straining. He was a loaded slingshot. What is he doing? Uraraka whispered. Stored potential energy, Ida noted, adjusting his glasses. He is using the tensile strength of the wire to compensate for initial acceleration. Start! The robot shouted. Bakugo blasted off. Boom boom boom. He used explosions behind him to propel himself. Izuku triggered the retraction mechanism on high torque, but he didn't let it pull him backward. He jumped forward, releasing the lock at the peak of the tension. The wire snapped back, catapulting him forward. It was a violent, jarring acceleration. Izuku felt his shoulder socket complain, but he gritted his teeth. He hit the ground running, his momentum already at maximum velocity from step 1. He pumped his arms. Form. Knees high. Chin down. Don't look at Bakugo. Bakugo crossed the line. 4.13 seconds. Izuku crossed a moment later. 5.98 seconds. He skidded to a halt, panting. It wasn't superhuman. It wasn't Ida's 3 seconds. But for a quirkless boy, it was Olympic level. Aizawa looked at the time. Under 6 seconds. Without a mobility quirk. Acceptable. Bakugo stared at the timer, then at Izuku. You used a wire? It's a support item, Izuku said, retracting the cable into his gauntlet. It supported me. Test 2, grip strength. Izuku held the digital dynamometer. Beside him, a massive boy with multiple arms, Shoji, squeezed his device. 540 kilograms. Whoa! Izuku looked at his own hand. His grip was strong from Jeanist's conditioning. He had to hold on to wires supporting his own body weight daily, but it wasn't superhuman. Maybe 60 kilograms on a good day, think. The test measures force applied to the handle. Izuku unspooled a loop of wire from his left gauntlet. He wrapped it around the handle of the dynamometer in his right hand, looping it 3 times. He locked the wire. Then, he triggered the retraction winch on his left arm. The wire tightened. It acted like a constrictor snake, squeezing the handle of the device with mechanical torque. The machine groaned. The plastic casing creaked. Izuku squeezed his hand over the wire to hide the mechanism slightly, though Aizawa was watching like a hawk. Beep. 180 kilograms. Not bad, Siro said. You got a grip like a gorilla, Midoriya. Izuku sweated. That nearly crushed my fingers. He released the tension quickly before the device shattered. Aizawa marked his clipboard. Creative application of external force. Legal. Test 3, standing long jump. This was Izuku's specialty. While other students used explosions, bakugo, or naval lasers, aoyama, to fly, Izuku simply looked up. The testing grounds were surrounded by lampposts, and the edge of the school building. He stood at the line. He aimed both gauntlets at the top of a lighting rig 30 meters away. Thwip. Thwip. Anchors secured. Izuku jumped. He retracted the lines instantly. He swung. A perfect pendulum arc. He soared over the sandpit, his legs extended gracefully. He looked less like a jumper and more like a trapeze artist. He released the lines at the apex of the swing, flipping once in the air for aerodynamic flair, and because Jeanist insisted on flair, and landed softly on the grass past the sandpit. Cleared the sandbox entirely, Aizawa noted. Infinity distance, effectively. He's like Spider-Man. Kaminari yelled. Dude, I want those gauntlets. Izuku stood up and dusted off his knees. He checked the wire feed. 70% capacity remaining. He had to be careful. Test 4, repeated side steps. This was harder. Wires couldn't help much with lateral speed in a confined space. Izuku relied on pure agility. He moved with the fluidity of water, a style he had copied from watching Velour spar. Low center of gravity, sliding rather than stepping. He didn't score at the top. Mineta, bouncing off his balls, dominated this one. But Izuku wasn't last. He was solidly middle of the pack. Consistency, Izuku told himself. Consistency is key. Don't be the loose thread. Test 5, the ball throw. This was it. The main event. Uraraka stepped up. She touched the ball. She threw it. It floated. And floated. And floated. Infinity, Aizawa showed the screen. The class cheered. That's cheating. Kaminari laughed. How are we supposed to beat physics? Midoriya, Aizawa called. The cheering died down. Izuku walked to the circle. He picked up the ball. It was a standard softball. Leather stitching. He stood in the circle. He looked at the field. It was 700 meters long. I can't throw this 700 meters, Izuku thought. The human arm, even with perfect form, tops out around 100 meters for a baseball. I need leverage. I need radius. He pulled out a small net bag from his utility belt, a mesh pouch made of reinforced nylon. He placed the ball inside. He attached the pouch to the end of his wire. He unspooled 10 meters of wire. What's he doing? Hagakure asked. Fishing? He's extending the radius, Momo Yayorozu spoke up, her eyes lighting up. Angular velocity equals radius times angular frequency. By increasing the radius of the swing, he increases the tangential velocity of the projectile upon release. It's the physics of a trebuchet, or a hammer throw. Izuku began to spin, slowly at first. The ball dragged on the ground, then faster. He lifted it. Whir! The ball whistled through the air. Izuku spun with it, his feet pivoting in a perfect circle. Faster. The G-force pulled at his arm. He felt his shoulder joint scream. The gauntlet dug into his wrist. Hold it together. Maintain the weave. He was a blur of teal and gray. The sound was a high-pitched hum, like a jet engine spooling up. Faster. Faster. He aimed for the sky. Smash! Izuku yelled, a habit he couldn't break, and released the locking mechanism. The clamp opened. The net bag opened. The ball shot out like a bullet. It vanished into the sky, breaking the sound barrier with a sharp crack. Izuku stumbled, dizzy from the spinning. He dropped to one knee, catching himself with his hand. He looked at Aizawa. Aizawa looked at the device. He stared at it for a long second. Then he turned the screen to the class. 702.1 meters. He broke 700? Cyril gasped. Without a strength quirk? It's just physics. Yayarosa clapped politely. Beautifully applied. Izuku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He beat Bakugo's junior high record. He was close to Bakugo's explosion record. He stood up, nursing his shoulder. DKU. The roar was animalistic. Izuku turned. Bakugo was charging. Explosions popped in his palms. His face was twisted into a mask of pure hatred. Tell me how you trick them. Bakugo screamed. You're quirkless. You're a pebble. You can't do this. He was fast. Faster than in middle school. He closed the distance in a second, his right hand raised for a blast that would likely send Izuku to the infirmary. Die! Aizawa's scarf began to lift. His hair began to float. He was about to erase Bakugo's quirk, but Izuku moved first. Jeanist Rule 4. When a fabric is stressed, it tears. When an opponent is stressed, they telegraph. Izuku didn't step back. He stepped in. He dropped to one knee, sliding under Bakugo's swinging right arm. As he slid, he fired his left gauntlet point-blank at Bakugo's left ankle. The wire wrapped tight. Izuku's momentum carried him past Bakugo. He slammed his hand onto the ground to break, and he yanked the wire. Denim bind, tripwire. Bakugo's legs were swept out from under him. Because he was charging with such forward momentum, the sudden stop of his feet sent his upper body crashing down. But Izuku wasn't done. He knew Bakugo. One fall wouldn't stop him. Izuku rolled to his feet. He fired his right gauntlet at Bakugo's raised right hand, the one sparking with nitroglycerin. The wire wrapped around the gauntlet/wrist. Izuku pulled, forcing Bakugo's hand into the dirt. Don't move, Kaken, Izuku panted. He stood behind Bakugo, holding the wires taut like reins on a wild horse. Bakugo was face down in the dirt, his leg bound, his firing hand pinned to the earth. Get off me! Bakugo roared, setting off an explosion into the dirt. Boom! Dirt sprayed everywhere. Izuku shielded his eyes but held the line. Suddenly, the wires went slack. Izuku blinked. The tension was gone? No, the force was gone. He looked down. Bakugo was still struggling, but no explosions were coming out. Izuku looked up. Aizawa was standing there. His hair was floating like a halo of black fire. His eyes were glowing red. His capture scarf was floating around him, ready to strike. That's enough, Aizawa said. His voice was dry, flat, and terrifying. Eraserhead. Izuku whispered. Aizawa glared at Bakugo. Don't make me use my quirk so much. I have dry eye. He blinked, and his hair fell. We're wasting time. Whoever starts the next fight gets expelled immediately. Bakugo scrambled to his feet. He looked at his hands, then at Izuku. He was shaking. Not with fear, but with the cognitive dissonance of what just happened. Deku took me down. Deku beat me, tch. Bakugo turned and stalked off to the back of the group, kicking up dust. Aizawa turned his gaze to Izuku. Izuku retracted his wires. He stood up straight, brushing the dust off his uniform. Midoriya, Aizawa said. Yes, sir. That capture technique, Aizawa said, his eyes narrowing slightly. You went for the ankle to disrupt balance, then the primary weapon hand to neutralize the threat. You didn't strike to injure. Best Jeanist teaches that a hero's job is to restrain, not to destroy, Izuku recited. Violence is a failure of style. Aizawa stared at him. For a moment, the corners of his mouth twitched upwards. Best Jeanist is a flashy show pony, Aizawa grumbled. But his methodology isn't terrible. He turned away. Next test. The verdict. The sun was setting. The students gathered around the hologram projector. All right, Aizawa said. Here are the results. The total is a composite of your scores across all 8 tests. He pressed a button. The list appeared. 1. Momo Yaoyorozu. 2. Shoto Todoroki. 3. Katsuki Bakugo. 4. Tenya Ida. 10. Izuku Midoriya. 20. Toru Hagakure, Invisible Girl. Izuku stared at his name. 10th. Smack in the middle, he beat half the class. He beat students with quirks like acid, electrification, and super strength. Sato. He looked down at the bottom of the list. Hagakure. She had raw stealth, but physically, she was just a normal girl without support gear. By the way, Aizawa said, turning off the projector. The expulsion was a logical ruse. Huh? The class screamed. It was a deception to draw out your upper limits, Aizawa said, putting eye drops in his eyes. I knew it, Yaoyorozu said, clutching her chest. It was obviously a pedagogical technique. That was a little scary, though, Ajui noted. Aizawa turned to walk away. There are handouts with the curriculum in the classroom. Look them over. Midoriya. Izuku froze. Yes? Aizawa didn't look back. Your gear relies on finite resources. Wires break. Winches jam. If you run out of string, you're just a civilian in a costume. Make sure you learn to fight when the spool is empty. He walked off. Izuku clenched his fist. He's right. I'm reliant on the tools. But, he looked at his gauntlets. They were scratched and dusty. A tailor is nothing without his needle. I just have to make sure I never lose it. The gate. As the students filed out, exhausted, Izuku found himself walking next to Ida and Uraraka. Midoriya! That was incredible! Uraraka cheered. You were like whoosh and bam. I can't believe you took down Bakugo. It was highly efficient, Ida agreed. Although your method of the ball throw was terrifyingly close to a projectile weapon violation. I was just using physics, Izuku smiled, rubbing the back of his neck. You're amazing, Deku! Uraraka beamed. Deku? Izuku blinked. Yeah. That's what Bakugo called you. It sounds cute. Like you can do it. Izuku paused. Deku. Useless. Wooden puppet. But today he hadn't been useless. He had been 10th. He had been a contender. Yeah, Izuku said, a genuine smile breaking across his face. I think I like it too. From the shadows of the school building, All Might watched them leave. He is doing well, All Might whispered. Beside him, Aizawa leaned against the wall. He's a problem child, Aizawa muttered. He's over-reliant on that equipment. And he has a reckless streak a mile wide. Did you see his shoulder after that dash? He nearly dislocated it. But he has the spirit, All Might said. Spirit doesn't stop bullets, Aizawa countered. But he has technique. Jeanist did a good job washing the hesitation out of him. He fights like a pro, not a student. Aizawa pushed off the wall. He's not zero potential, All Might. He's a loose thread. If we pull him the right way, he might just hold the whole class together. All Might smiled. Indeed. The aftermath. Later that night, Izuku sat in his room. His muscles ached with a deep, satisfying burn. His phone buzzed. From Mentor. I saw the test results. 10th place? Acceptable for a debut collection. However, I notice you allowed dust to settle on your knees after the binding maneuver. A hero must brush themselves off immediately after a takedown. It asserts dominance. Izuku chuckled. To Mentor. I'll work on it, sensei. Aizawa-sensei said I rely too much on the gear. From Mentor. Aizawa is a minimalist. He prefers grunge. Ignore his fashion advice, but heed his combat warnings. We will work on hand-to-hand combat next week. No wires. Just pleats and pain. Izuku swallowed hard. Pleats and pain. He looked at his hero costume hanging on the door. The teal jumpsuit shone in the moonlight. He was the first quirkless student in the hero course. The target on his back was huge. Bakugo was furious. The villains would underestimate him. Good, Izuku thought, turning off the lamp. Let them underestimate me. That just means they won't see the knot tightening until it's too late. He closed his eyes, dreaming of threads weaving together to form a symbol of peace. Not a solid pillar of gold like All Might, but a complex, unbreakable tapestry of denim and determination.